And we mentioned a few times that you have the goal and then you lay out the steps that are needed to achieve the goal. How do you know or find out what is necessary to achieve the goal?
Well, that's an interesting one in esport because that's something that hasn't developed over time. In traditional sport, relatively, you you know there's books if you like, there's people, there's history, there's experience, there's everything else. Um, so at the moment, it's certainly the best coaches have got the best knowledge of that, um, and a way to actually see if that's happening. So, as a coach, you've got a sort of a number of tools. You've got volume, you've got intensity, and you've got rest. It's kind of your basic blocks of how to train people. Um, Now, how you measure those in esport is a challenge because we can all say we're playing for 10, 12 hours a day, but sitting in front of your screen 10, 12 hours a day is that, well, you're not going to get any better. You get tired and bored and demotivated. Um, so we get into this idea of purposeful practice. Actually, is what you're doing making you a better player? And then the question is, well, how do I know if I'm a better player? Now, I've had very, very few esport players actually turn that round and ask me. It's always been the coach has been pushing. It's like, well, okay, you tell me you've done 5 hours, and are you any better? Well, yeah, I've done 5 hours. It's like, well, yeah. So what? What have you actually done? So that's been a big step that I'd say I've done relatively well working with the coaches I've been working with, is to get that mindset change of actually being able to record and find a method of monitoring, is what you're doing working? And there's not an easy way to that at the moment. I'm actually doing some things that looking at cognitive load and that side of things. In traditional sport, the easiest one is you have a pulse meter at a very basic level, and you can see if you stress the physiology and is overstressed and recovering, and that side of things, which doesn't really work with esport in the same way, and that you haven't got the same physiological parameters, if you like. Okay, you do get elevated pulse rates, but it's not the same. So cracking that one as an easy way to monitor things. Sleep is quite a good one, new overloading the system. And that's the talent of a coach, is to be able to balance that overload, which is what you need to do to create a reaction, to create an improved performance. But it's more monitoring the recovery process when that reaction is happening. And certainly as a coach, that's to me the more skillful bit. Anyone can smash a person. You can just put more and more on the program and you destroy them. And it's like, well, I told you to do loads and you couldn't do it. It's actually, how do you pull back? When do you the the power of doing less? I think is really key to being a good coach. The go-to tends to be do more or practice harder. We'll do some more. We'll do more. And actually, I find the best coach is the one who say, well, actually, no, tomorrow we're having off, or tomorrow we're going to go for a walk, or tomorrow we're going to do something different. So what do you mean? I want to do more. I haven't got it right yet. It's okay. Well, just stop. We're going to step back. And that to me is the best coaches have that. Have got the eye to know when to do less. And I think that's a very takes experience and confidence, because it's not anyone's go-to. It's diving harder and do an extra hour. Um, but it's I think you picked up a very key point to me of where esport needs to evolve most, is that capacity to actually monitor, is what you're doing working. And it's every game changes so fast. This latest League of Legends, it's been a huge change, isn't it, in the whole meta and the patch and everything. And suddenly the good players are going, well, hang on, this is all it's gone, and what do I do? And it's been a big reset of people having to relearn stuff um, around that. And it's the capacity of the coach, who can get that done quickest and get the players to buy into that quickest, that actually it's an opportunity and a challenge rather than something that's a disaster for them, that are going to succeed best. Um, but how do you know if you're doing that? And that to me is a really key question to esport coaches, in a very tough way, I guess, sort of justify what you're doing.
Mm.
And as a performance director, that's a lot of the question. Is like, well, okay, you're watching them play. What are they actually? What are you enabling? What are they actually learning? Um, yeah, and I think that's an area where, well, there's a lot of work to do, and a lot of coaching development to happen.
Mm. And I think, I mean, you touched on it there. If you were to suggest, okay, tomorrow we're going to just go for a walk or something, I think one of the other things that makes it so hard for coaches to do that, even if they wanted to, is a lot of the way we judge coaching is we simply, because we don't have these good measurements, we simply look at the best team and what they're doing, and therefore we do that. And so as soon as the best team starts to take recovery seriously, now everyone else is allowed to. And I've seen this happen over and over.
But the best team is quite often the best because they've learned how to do if we say a bigger volume. They can actually train well for 5 hours a day, 6 hours, whatever it is. But that has taken time to develop that capacity to do it. So it then becomes very tricky in that because they can work very hard for say 6 hours, they then can actually take a day off or do rest properly because they need it. Whereas what you then tend to find is people say, "Oh, look, they're taking days off," and you end up with people taking the days off without doing the work. So it's you need to be very careful as a coach taking other people's training programs. There's a East German chap who came over and took over British rowing, and he was incredibly successful, or is. He's still coaching. He's won an Olympic gold medal at every Olympics since the 70s. And just extraordinary capacity to adapt to what's in front of him. And he was always very open. You could see his training program, no problem, because he knew that it wasn't what was written on the bit of paper; it's how you did it and how you translated that to the athletes in front of you. So, getting hold of a Chinese program, great, but it's how do you implement that to a Western team? How do you implement that to players who aren't used to doing or haven't got the capacity yet to do the 8, 9, 12 hours? You hear stories of the Korean camps, but culturally they've learned how to do that. It's not that you can't do it, but you have to take the steps to get to that stage. We always have a bit of a joke. You can pick up all sorts of training programs, and basically you could end up with a rest day every day of the week. I'm in this program today, I'm in that program today, and it's like I'm following all these programs. It's fine, but in the end, you have to find that balance of work to rest, and again, that's a coaching skill of knowing when to push and knowing when to back off, and that's a real fundamental of being a good coach. How hard can you push? And at the higher level, you're always just trying to find that edge of collapse, if you like, or injury, or pushing them over, and it's how brave are you, and what time of the season, and what are you trying to achieve, to how hard you push over that edge, and when do you pull back. And pushing them over is easy. Knowing when to come back is the skill and around that.
Definitely. I mean, I think so many of the steps you're talking about are just so crucial and so missed at the moment. I mean, I heard a League of Legends coach talking recently, saying that when they go to the World Championship, they then scrim, they do their practice, they do as much as the Eastern teams, because suddenly the Eastern teams are there. And I think it's because of two reasons. Firstly, because they're the best teams, therefore we're just going to copy them, which, like you say, already is a problem. And secondly, because the only way we can practice, at least in League of Legends, is with someone else, with another team. You don't have the option to scrim for 12 hours a day in Europe because no one else does it. And he was saying he's been multiple times, but is only now sort of starting to think, like, this makes us just so much worse when we're playing. Suddenly we're doing a month of twice the load as normal, while the performance is most important and the development is almost least important. Like by the time you get to the World Championship, now it's about kind of maintaining. And I always say, as the example, it's obviously a bit more extreme, but before the World Cup final, for example, in that last week in rugby teams, they'll do either no training or like one training thing, because it's like the development has to be done by the time we're at that stage. And now it's just about balancing performance.
And I think, there's some very nice examples. And how in traditional sport, we call it tapering, how you taper, but you have to have done the work and capacity to have something to taper from. So you have to create that environment whereby, you know, they are stressed, they do need rest, they do need that tiredness, and then the way the body works is you get this bounce. So actually you sort of go down, but then the curve goes back up higher than it was before if it's working, you know, a very simple level. But yes, exactly that, you know, and the temptation of coaches to arrive at an event and go, right, now we can really push on, it's too much too late, and it's going to have a very detrimental effect. You know, and there's a sudden element of panic, if almost, and we've got to do more and more and more. Whereas actually that was the way you should have been working 1 month, whatever it is, on your periodization cycle. And I think, um, you know, it's easy to sit here and talk about it. We've got 20, 30 years experience of getting it wrong and right. But for esport coaches trying to, you know, basically sort of been ex-players as a general point and done it by just playing, it is a trickier learning. Actually, how do you periodize an esport program? Well, I think that's where traditional sport people have an intuitive feel that isn't yet intuitive from the majority of esport coaches.